Claude responded, I built the fence around that garden with my own two hands the summer my wife got sick, so she'd have somewhere pretty to look at from the kitchen window. I built the fence around that garden with my own two hands the summer my wife got sick, so she'd have somewhere pretty to look at from the kitchen window. 11 years later, I was standing at my son's graveside when my daughter in law leaned over and whispered that I had 2 weeks to get my things out of her house. Her house, the house I paid off in 2009. I want to tell you about my son Michael, and about the woman he married, and about the 14 days that followed the worst morning of my life. I'm going to call her Renee here, because some of you watching might know her, and I don't need her finding out how this ends before I'm ready to tell it. My name doesn't matter much anymore. I'm 67 years old. I've buried a wife and now a son. And if you're a father listening to this, or a mother, or anyone who's ever built something with your hands only to have someone try to take it from you while you're still grieving, I think you'll understand why I'm telling this story. Michael was 34 when he died. He was my only child. His mother, Carol, passed when he was 26, and after that it was just the two of us for a long while. Until he met Renee at a conference in Ohio and brought her home for Thanksgiving looking happier than I'd seen him since his mother's funeral. I remember thinking, well, thank God, because I didn't know how to fix that kind of quiet in a house. I thought Renee had fixed it. I want to be honest with you. I never fully trusted her. Not because she did anything wrong, not back then. It was smaller than that, the way she'd go quiet when I brought up the past, the way she corrected Michael in front of me about small things, the way she started referring to the house as our house within about 8 months of moving in, when the deed had my name on it, and only my name on it, going back to 1998. But Michael was happy, or he told me he was. And I told myself that was enough. A father learns to swallow a lot of quiet doubts if it means his son gets to keep smiling. They lived with me those last 3 years. It made sense at the time. Michael had gone back to school for his certification. Money was tight, and I had 4 empty bedrooms in a house built for a family that had shrunk down to just me. I told them, stay as long as you need. I never once made them feel like guests. Renee had her own key within a month. I gave her one myself. Michael died on a Tuesday morning in March, on his way to a job interview, when a truck ran a stop sign on Route 9 outside of Dayton. That's it. That's the whole senseless story of how my son left this world. Not some grand tragedy, just a stop sign nobody stopped at, and a phone call from a police officer whose voice I can still hear right now if I close my eyes. I was the one who identified him. Renee couldn't do it. She said she couldn't do it, and I understood. I did. Grief takes people different ways. So I went alone, and I stood there in that cold room, and I looked at my boy's face for the last time, and something in me went quiet, in a way it's never gone quiet before. Not even when Carol died. The funeral was 11 days later. Renee planned all of it, which I let her do because I didn't have the strength to argue about flowers and hymns. I paid for the plot beside his mother's because that's where I'd always imagined he'd rest, someday, a long time from now. Not at 34. Here's where I need you to understand something about that day, because it matters for everything that comes after. The service was small. Michael's coworkers came, a few cousins from Michigan, my brother Gerald and his wife. Renee wore black and cried beautifully, if that makes sense, the kind of crying that gets looks of sympathy from strangers. I'm not saying it wasn't real. I don't know anymore what was real with her and what wasn't. That's part of what this whole story is about. After the burial, everyone came back to the house. It's tradition in my family. You eat, you tell stories about the person you lost, you let the house hold the grief for a few hours so the cemetery doesn't have to hold all of it alone. We did the same thing when Carol died. Michael was 26 then, and I remember him standing in that same living room, lost, the same way I was standing there, lost now, except this time there was no Michael to comfort. I was sitting in my chair, the one I've had since before Carol got sick when Renee came and knelt down in front of me. People were still filing in from the cemetery, coats still on, casserole dishes still being unwrapped in the kitchen, and she took my hand, the way you'd take the hand of someone you loved, and she said, low enough that only I could hear it, you need to stop crying, Frank. People are staring, and I need you to understand something. This is my house now, and I need you gone within 2 weeks. I want you to sit with that for a second, the way I had to sit with it. My son wasn't in the ground 12 hours yet. I asked her what she meant, because some part of my brain refused to process it the first time. She said it again, quieter, calmer, like she was explaining something obvious to a confused child. She said Michael had signed the house over to her the year before, as part of some estate planning they'd done for tax purposes, and that she had the paperwork, and that she was sorry, truly sorry, for the timing, but she needed me to understand that grief didn't change legal reality. She used those words, legal reality. At her husband's funeral reception, 12 feet from where his coworkers were eating deviled eggs off paper plates, I didn't say anything back to her. I want you to know that. I didn't make a scene. I didn't call her a liar in front of 30 grieving people, even though every part of me wanted to stand up and ask the room to bear witness to what she'd just said. I just nodded. I told her I understood. And then I got up, and I went and found my brother Gerald in the kitchen, and I asked him to drive me to his place for a few days, because I needed some air. I didn't tell him what she'd said. Not yet. I wasn't ready to say it out loud, because saying it out loud would make it real, and I already had enough real things to carry that week. Gerald's a good man. Practical. Doesn't ask too many questions when a man clearly isn't ready to answer them. He just said, "Get your bag, Frank," and that was that. It was 3 days later, lying awake on his pull-out couch at 2 in the morning, when I finally told him everything. The words at the funeral, the 2-week deadline, the claim about a deed transfer I had never once heard about, never signed, never even discussed with my own son. Gerald sat up in the dark and said something I'll never forget. He said, "Frank, whose name is on that house?" And that's when I remembered the folder. I need to back up here, because this part matters more than anything else in this story. About 4 months before Michael died, he came to me alone one Saturday afternoon while Renee was out. He seemed nervous, which wasn't like him. He sat me down at the kitchen table and slid an envelope across to me. Inside was a copy of the original deed to the house, my name on it, notarized, filed with the county recorder back in 1998, untouched since. He also had copies of our property tax statements, going back years, all paid by me, all in my name. He said, "Dad, I want you to keep this somewhere safe. Not because anything's wrong, just keep it safe. Promise me." I asked him why, and he got quiet, the way he used to get quiet as a boy when he didn't want to tell me something because he thought it would worry me. He said, "Renee's been talking to some estate guy about restructuring things. I told her it's not our house to restructure. I just want you protected, no matter what happens." I remember laughing a little, telling him he was being paranoid, that his wife loved him and by extension loved me too. He didn't laugh back. He just said, "Promise me you'll keep this somewhere she won't find it." I promised. I put that folder in a lockbox at my bank, not even in the house, because some instinct in me, some quiet fatherly instinct that had never fully trusted her, told me that was the right thing to do. 4 months later, my son was dead, and that folder was the only thing standing between me and a woman who was about to try to put me out on the street 2 weeks after burying him. I didn't go back to the house during those 2 weeks. I let her think I was gone, defeated, an old man who'd take a whispered command at a funeral and simply disappear. I stayed at Gerald's, and every day I got a little quieter, and every day Gerald watched me get quieter. And on day 9, he finally said, "Frank, you're planning something. I can see it on your face." I told him then. I told him about the folder, about the deed, about the promise Michael had asked me to make. And Gerald, being Gerald, said the only sensible thing anyone had said to me in 2 weeks, then stop being quiet about it and go talk to a lawyer. Her name was Patricia Vance, a real estate attorney Gerald's daughter had used for a closing the year before. I sat in Patricia's office on a Thursday morning with that folder open on the desk between us, and I watched her face change as she went through it, page by page. She looked up at me and said, "Mr. Frank, can I ask you something? Has anyone asked you to sign anything in the past year? A quitclaim, a transfer, anything with your signature on a property document?" I said, "No, never. I would have remembered that." She nodded slowly, like a piece was falling into place for her that hadn't been for me yet. She said, "Then I need you to give me a few days. I think I understand what may have happened here, but I want to be certain before I say it out loud to you." 4 days later, she called me into her office again, and this time she wasn't alone. There was a man there, too, introduced to me as an investigator she sometimes worked with on cases involving property fraud. His name was Samuel Reyes, and he had a manila folder of his own, considerably thicker than mine. Here's what they told me, and I'm going to tell it to you the way they told it to me, because I think you deserve to hear it plainly. Renee had, in fact, filed paperwork with the county 8 months earlier, a quitclaim deed, purportedly signed by me, transferring ownership of the house into her name alone. My signature was on it, except it wasn't my signature. It wasn't even close once you looked at it next to my actual signature on the original 1998 deed, side by side. Whoever forged it had clearly never seen my handwriting up close, because a real notary, a licensed one, doing her job correctly would never have let that signature through. Except the notary stamp on the document belonged to a woman named Dolores Kern, whose license, Samuel discovered, had been suspended for unrelated reasons 4 months before that document was ever notarized. In plain terms, the deed was fake, the signature was fake, and the notarization was performed by someone who had no legal authority to notarize anything at the time she supposedly did it. I sat there in that office, and I felt something I hadn't let myself feel in the 2 weeks since the funeral. Not grief, rage. Clean, focused rage, the kind that doesn't shake your hands but instead makes them very, very still. Patricia asked me the question that changed everything about how I decided to move forward. She said, "Frank, do you want to handle this quietly? Have the deed voided, restore your ownership, and let her go? Or do you want to report it? Because what she did here is a felony, forgery and fraud on a public record. If you report it, there will be consequences beyond just losing the house. Ask." I thought about Michael. I thought about him sliding that envelope across the kitchen table, nervous, protective, asking me to promise. I thought about how 12 hours after we put him in the ground, his wife had knelt in front of me and told me to stop crying because I was inconveniencing her plans. I told Patricia I wanted to report it. The county recorder's office moved faster than I expected once Samuel's findings and Patricia's filing landed on the right desk. Within 3 weeks, the fraudulent deed was formally voided, and ownership of the house was restored, cleanly, fully, exactly where it had legally always been in my name. That part, at least, was simple once the truth came out. The truth almost always is simple. It's the lies that take 12 pages to explain. But it didn't stop there, and I want you to know that too, because I know some of you watching want to know she faced something more than paperwork. Because the notary's license had already been suspended, and because the amount involved in the fraudulent transfer exceeded a certain threshold under state law, the district attorney's office picked the case up separately from my civil matter. Renee was charged with 2 felony counts related to forgery and filing a false instrument with a government office. I'm told, secondhand, through Patricia, that she's since accepted a plea arrangement that includes restitution and a suspended sentence contingent on probation, though I try not to follow the details too closely. I don't take pleasure in it, if I'm honest with you. I don't feel the satisfaction I thought I might feel. Mostly, I just feel tired. She moved out of the house 9 days after the deed was voided. I wasn't there when she left. Gerald was, because I asked him to be, mostly to make sure nothing else disappeared from that house that shouldn't. He told me she didn't say much. She left the key on the kitchen counter, my kitchen counter, and she didn't leave a note. I moved back in on a Sunday in April, 6 weeks after I'd buried my son. The garden I built for Carol was still there, overgrown by then, weeds up past the fence posts, but still there, still mine, still standing the way I'd built it 15 years before. I want to tell you something Gerald said to me the night before I moved back in, because I think about it more than almost anything else from that whole terrible spring. He said, "Frank, you didn't win anything here. You just got back what was already yours." And he was right. There's no trophy in this. There's no moment where triumphant music plays, and I feel like the hero of my own story. I got my house back. I did not get my son back. Nothing in that folder, nothing in that courtroom, nothing Patricia or Samuel or the county recorder ever did was going to give me back the sound of Michael's voice, calling me from the driveway when he came home from work. Some evenings now, I sit in that same armchair, the one I was sitting in when she knelt down in front of me and told me to stop crying, and I look out at that garden through the kitchen window the way Carol used to, and I think about my boy. I think about a kitchen table conversation 4 months before he died. A nervous young man sliding an envelope across to his father and asking him to make a promise. I think about how that promise, small as it seemed at the time, was the only thing standing between me and losing everything I had left of the family I built. I lost my son. Nothing that happened afterward changes that, and nothing ever will. But I got to keep the house we made a home in, the fence I built with my own hands, the garden that still blooms every spring whether I deserve it to or not. And I got to keep something else, too, the truth of who my son really was, right up until the very end. A man who saw more clearly than I gave him credit for. A man who protected his father even when he couldn't protect himself. If you're a parent listening to this, and someone you trusted has ever tried to take advantage of your grief, I hope you hear what I'm about to tell you, because I needed to hear it back then, and nobody said it to me plainly enough. Grief does not make you powerless. It makes you tired, and it makes you vulnerable. And people who are willing to exploit that will come looking for you exactly when you're least equipped to fight back. But the paperwork still matters. The truth still matters. And sometimes the person you lost already knew that and left you exactly what you'd need, folded up quietly in an envelope, months before you ever knew you'd need it. Claude responded, "Sometimes the people who love us protect us quietly, long before we ever know we'll need it, a folder in a lockbox, a promise kept, a small act of care tucked. Sometimes the people who love us protect us quietly, long before we ever know we'll need it, a folder in a lockbox, a promise kept, a small act of care tucked away like a seed." Grief can make us feel powerless, but it never erases the truth, and it never erases what someone left behind for us out of love. Hold on to that. Someone, somewhere, is still looking out for you. A small note for you. This story was written and fictionalized by AI for entertainment purposes, while hoping to carry a genuine, positive life lesson to you.